Hello, everybody. Benga Olatunji here. Introduction to Nature of Business Management, still on Management Studies. We want to introduce the nature of management to ourselves. We had earlier looked at the details of and the breakdown of management as a course. Now we are going into it one after the other, and this is what we are going to be dealing with right away. We are going to be defining the definition of what business is. As simple as it may seem, we need to know the technicality aspect of it as expected of us to answer. We need to look at the objectives of business, and under the objective of business we are going to divide it into primary and secondary objectives. Then we'll move on to classification of business, and under the classification of business we are going to be looking at classification. We can classify in form of ownership. We can classify using the sizes of the organization. We can classify business organization using their input. We can classify them using their output, and we are going to be dealing with it in details. Then we'll move on to types of manufacturing industry, which directly relates to the classification of business based on output. Then we are going to look at the international standard of industrial classification, which we call ISIC. ISIC has a bit of more elaborate classification, which is more elaborate than the normal classification of business and type of manufacturing industries that we can have, like the analytical, the synthetic process industry, and the assembly lines. So we are going to look into details of what ISIC has to say about the classification and naming of industries. So let us start off by establishing one fact, that business organizations are majority of the time established for money making, that is for profitability. Let us establish that. However, there are some businesses that are established but are not for profit. We usually call them not for profit making organization or non-governmental organization, NGO. So just to establish that, so basically the aim of NGOs are usually to attend to the need of society, and usually they target an aspect of the community or society in which they are based to attend to a peculiar societal need. But generally, businesses are for profit making. Having said that, what is business by itself? How can we define what a business is? I'm going to tell us the definition expected of us, and also my own layman view and definition of what a business is, just to add things up together. So we can say a business basically is an organized effort and activity. Don't forget that we are studying management, and management actually is about organizing, coordinating, utilization of resources, putting it together to achieve aim and objective. So likewise, when we are talking about a business, it is important that we mention that a business is an organized activity. It's an organized effort by the founders, by the shareholders, and those that really have interest in the formation of the business. Having said that, that is an organized effort or organized activity. It is driven towards making profit. Businesses are established to make profit, to maximize the wealth of the shareholder. It is important to say that, and also as part of definition of term of what business is, it's good that we mention that it's a lawful activity. It must be lawful human activity. Don't forget that there may be other organized efforts, there may be other organized activity, but if they are not lawful, we cannot call them business. So it's important that we mention it, so we can say that a business is an organized activity, or a business is a lawful and organized activity aimed or driven towards maximizing profitability using the available resources. So another thing we need to mention when we are defining what a business is the utilization of resources towards achieving or producing goods and services, or rendering services. So keywords to note when we are defining what a business is, as it is expected of us. We should ensure that we mention that it's an organized activity, is an organized lawful activity, it makes use of resources, and to achieve profitability by producing goods or rendering services to the society. So that is the definition of what a business is. Now, my own layman definition of business is a business. You are in a business once you have a person or group of people that are ready to buy your service from you with a consideration, that is, they part with something in form especially of monetary value. So you give value to them and they pay you in return. Once you have a customer, you are in a business. And if you do not have a customer, you are not in business. Don't forget that when we are talking about business now, we establish one thing, that businesses are for profit making. Meanwhile, exception is that there are some organized efforts that are not geared towards making profit. So if you are not in business, if you are not having a customer that are ready to part away with consideration in monetary value, you are not in business, because no business venture can survive without gain, without profitability. Having established that, we need to move on to the objectives of business or businesses. Basically, objectives of business can be divided into primary and secondary objective. And the primary is that businesses are established for profit making, for maximization of owners' wealth. Please, we should not forget that that is the primary purpose or objective of business. Then the secondary are a bit numerous. When we are talking about secondary objective of business or businesses, we're talking about business expansion and business growth. Some organizations could have the objective of expanding and having enlarged and business growth. Innovation is another objective of organization. what do we mean when we are talking about innovation? We are talking about making use of the old things in a better way. That is, making a better use of old things. So when we do that, we say we are innovative. So some people can wake up one day and say, okay, why can't we do this thing better in this way? Why can't we reproduce this thing that has been done before? So when we make better what has been done before, we say we are innovative. And a business venture could have the objective of innovation, going into the business, not that they want to sell something that is new in the industry, but they are doing it in a new way and people are buying it. Another secondary objective we can talk about is productivity. Productivity, that is ensuring that we use resources to the maximum ability that they can produce. That is, we ensure that no natural resources, no factor of production is being wasted. That is talking about productivity. So a business organization, when it's incorporated and it goes into business, we achieve productivity. Also, another secondary objective of a business venture, we can talk about employee satisfaction. Some organization have it as part of their corporate objective. Employee satisfaction, they want the people that are working with them to be very happy. Last but not the least that I'm going to mention is positive public image. Positive public image, that is, organization wants the community, the society, the country to perceive them well, to perceive well of them. Sometimes we call it organizations or business footprints. They want people to know them and notice them for good. And of course, because the primary objective of an organization is to make profits, then we can say a part of the secondary objective of business is shareholders wealth maximization, to maximize the wealth of shareholders. So on the objective of business, now we've mentioned a couple of things. We've mentioned the primary objective, which is to make profits. We said that shareholders' wealth is part of the secondary objective. Expansion and business growth, innovation, productivity, employee satisfaction, positive public image. These are part of what we can say are primary and secondary objectives of business organization. Then we will move on to classification of businesses. Classification of businesses. So how can we classify a business venture and business organization? Basically, we can classify organization in form of the pattern of ownership, in form of their size or sizes, their output and their input. Ownership, size, output, input. So let us take them one after the other. We can classify an organization based on ownership. Then we say we have some organizations that are publicly owned, that are privately owned. We have some organizations that have limited liability. We have some organizations that are business name, that is registered business name, in which the liability and the profitability belongs to the owner. So the business owner is not separated from his or her organization. So that is by form of ownership. Then you want to classify an organization by its size or sizes. We may be talking about the micro organization, maybe talking about small scale organization, medium scale organization, and large scale organization. I mentioned four things as they relate to sizes. Now they could be micro, small, medium, and large scale enterprises. Of course, there are criteria There are criteria rather that make an organization to be micro, to be small, to be medium, or to be large organization, depending on the country and the governance, code of governance that the country uses. So anywhere you are hearing me from, that is determined by the countrywide governance. So, but we can say an organization is can be divided and classified as micro, small, medium scale organization, and large scale organization. That is based on sizes. We've mentioned based on ownership. Let us go by classification by their input. So when we are classifying organization based on their input, we can classify them into four areas or segments: agro-based, forest-based, marine-based, and chemical-based organization or businesses. Agro-based, forest-based, marine-based, and chemical-based organization. Basically, these are a bit self-explanatory. The agro-based organization, like for example, use inputs like cotton, cocoa, palm kernel, palm oil as their input. So we call them, we say they are agro. That is, they are from the word agriculture, agric. So those are agro-based organization having their inputs like cotton, cocoa, and palm or palm kernel or anything from palm generally. Then when we are talking about forest-based organization, looking at organization like paper industry. You know, paper industry rely heavily on forest, on timber. So we say they are forest-based organization. Then we can look at organization like fertilizer producers and the like, drug producers, and we will say that they are chemical-based organization. And there are some organizations that rely heavily on the oceanic, and we call them marine-based organization, like the shipment organization. Then we can move on to types of manufacturing industry, which a bit relate directly to output. So when we are talking about, oh, before I go into it, let me talk about the output. I just remembered as I talk about the output. So I've not mentioned the classification based on output. So when we are talking about organizations that are classified based on output, we'll be talking about organization that we call they are into basic, they are into capital. Then we have those that are intermediate, and we have the consumer good industry. Let me come one by one. Under classification by output, we'll be talking about basic industries. We'll be talking about capital good industry or organizations or businesses. We'll be talking about the intermediate good industry. We'll be talking about consumer good industry. So what organization are basic industry? When we're talking about organizations that are basic industry, they their basic input or raw material are their basic input relies on nature, and their outputs are relied upon by other industry. For example, when we are talking about organizations that produce or into fertilizer are a bit organic, and at the end of the day, the agro industry relies heavily on it to generate farm produce and the like. So we move on to the capital industry. When we're talking about the capital industry, they are the industries that or organizations that produce plant equipment, machinery, and tools. They are capital in nature, and we call them capital goods industry. Then we have the intermediate good industry, in which what they basically we do is to put different components together to produce another output. They put different components together and they at the end of the day have an holistic output. The last but not the least among them is the consumer goods industry. Consumer goods industry basically are usually end users products, not like the capital industry or the intermediate industry. The consumer good industry are basically what they do is to produce what we usually use almost on daily basis, and we can divide consumer goods industry into two: those that produce durable consumer goods and those that produce non-durable goods. The durable goods in form of television, TV sets, electronics, they are long lasting, so they are durable. And non-durable consumer goods like pastry, toothpaste, and the like. So let us now move on to types of manufacturing industry. Types of manufacturing industry. So we'll be talking about the analytical industry, synthetic industry, we'll be talking about process industry, we'll be talking about assembly line. That's last but not the least. Let me come a bit slowly. When we are talking about types of manufacturing organization or industry, we must but talk about the analytical industry, the synthetic industry, the process industry, and the assembly line. So let us pick them one after the other. When we're talking about the analytical industry, they have singular elements of material inputs, and when they produce outputs that are multifaceted. For example, the refinery, they have crude oil, raw, then they produce, at the end of the day, they will give us petrol, they will give us diesel, kerosene, lubricant oil, lubricating oil, and etc. etc. So that is an analytical example of analytical industry. Then when we are talking about the synthetic, from the word synthesize, we are talking about organizations that have several inputs, but at the end of the day they have singular outputs. It's like the reverse of the analytical. For example, when we are talking about cement industry, we put limestone together with iron oxide, silica, and some other things that I may not even remember now, mix them together to form cement. So they have several inputs mixed together, blended together to give us one singular output called cement. Then when we are talking about process industry is an industry that pass through their output pass through a lot of different processes. So routinely they must pass through a lot of processes before a, the end product can be achieved. So an industry, for example, like that of a textile industry, in which they must go to the farm and get the cotton, they must clean the cotton, they must dyeing the cotton, they must pin it well enough to lay out flat and in good texture and the like. After that, they must weave it very well, and after that they must bleach the raw cotton that is coming from. After that, they need to then dye it into different colors so that people can have variety. Then we can say that we have clothing. So we call them process industry because their products pass through a lot of different processes before they could have the end product. Then when we are talking about assembly line, when we are talking about assembly line industry, we are talking about industries that have various components put together as one. They have various components. They put them together to form a singular unit. Example is car production line. When we are talking about car production line, it's a very good example of assembly line. So we had looked at nature of business. Under it, we had gone through the definition of what a business is and keywords that we need to note when we are defining what a business really is. We had looked at that already. We had looked at objectives of a business, had been looked into already. We had looked at the primary and the secondary objectives still under the nature of business now. We had looked at types of manufacturing industry. We had looked at classification of businesses, and under the classification of businesses we had looked at classification by ownership, classification by size, classification by output, classification by input. We had looked at types of manufacturing industry, and when we are talking about manufacturing industry, we are talking about the analytical industry, we are talking about the synthetic industry, we are talking about the process industry, and we are talking about the assembly line. So this is G. James Associates, and Gbenga Olatunji is your ethical tutor that I've been speaking. We had loved that you subscribe, click the notification button. If you enjoy the video, please share it to others. When you click the notification button, you are putting yourself in a position to always receive notification from us anytime that we release new videos, which we promise to do every now and then. Subscribe and comment should in case you have any questions that you will have loved to ask. So after this now, we will move on to the other aspects of nature of business, which is we are going to be discussing growth of business and why business fail. We are going to be talking about various forms of business ownership. Don't forget we had mentioned ownership as part of classification of business. Now we are going to go into it in details. We will look at forms of business ownership, then we will look at stakeholders concepts and their expectation and how to meet their expectation using Mendel's matrix. From G. James Associate Gbenga Olatunji will be signing off. We are value to life. We are value to your business.